Now, our next guest is the former U.S. Secretary of Energy under President Barack Obama. In his role, he advanced energy technology, nuclear security, and strategic stability, working with the American scientific community. And then, along with then U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, Moniz played a pivotal role in negotiating the historic Iran nuclear agreement back in 2015. However, sanctions were fully reimposed under President Trump this Monday. Welcome to Surveillance, Mr. Moniz. As always, you can make us a little bit smarter about where the world economy goes because of the price of oil. First question, OPEC has done about 3 U-turns this year. Have they been dealt a rough hand because there were these sanctions on Iran, but then there were these waivers?
Well, certainly the Iran sanctions issues are very important, especially in a time of tight reserve capacity to produce. I don't know the exact specifics of the waivers, but they are, of course, temporary. And I think in the longer term, the oil markets will want to know very much whether those sanctions will continue. Iran is now exporting about 1.5 million barrels a day, and if that were to be sustained, then I think we would expect stability in the markets, barring another big geopolitical upset.
Where do you see the price going? How difficult is it to predict the price of oil? It's always been impossible. Is it more difficult now than it was 10 years ago?
I think what you said is correct. It's always hard to know how the oil price moves. But as I say, I think if the Iran sanctions waivers are continued, there's no structural reason, in my view, to expect major shifts. But there's always surprises in this business, including if there is a significant additional reduction in Iranian exports, or on the other side, if the issues between Kuwait and Saudi Arabia are resolved, that could provide more supply. So I think right now, with oil prices, we have to wait and see. But again, I don't see any major structural issue if the Iran exports certainly are sustained. I might also add, because you did say it was really a reimposition of sanctions, but I will note a major difference here, and that is that prior to the Iran agreement, the whole world cooperated on enforcing those sanctions on Iran. And obviously, not surprisingly, as we've seen now with the United States' unilateral action on the deal, there is basically no support internationally for helping out with the sanctions. Not that they won't be effective. They will be certainly partially effective because of the United States' strength in the global financial system. But without cooperation, it's hard to see sustained maximum effectiveness, at least.
Secretary Moniz, what's your sense about where energy policy is headed in the U.S. after the midterm elections?
Well, one thing I think is very important that underpins energy policy and our move towards a low-carbon future is what emerged as a bipartisan consensus on clean energy technology innovation. Now, I very much hope, I see no reason why that would not continue. On the other hand, in terms of a major energy policy change, something, for example, that addressed global warming, I think it's fairly unlikely to see that in the next couple of years.
Well, Dr. Moniz, I know you took theoretical physics PhD at Stanford in 1972, and I believe your thesis there was on gridlock. Let's go to it. Can we have an energy policy, an advance in energy policy in the United States with congressional gridlock?
Well, as I say, I don't expect a major policy in these 2 years. There will be other political issues, I believe, to sort out. But I am optimistic, frankly, that somewhere down the road, a bit further, we will see a national policy emerge to address global warming. But if I can say one other thing, Tom, is that we should not lose sight of the fact that the states have been the place of major progress. And in fact, if anything, the elections on Tuesday, I think, expanded the footprint of effective state action.
I just had a nightmare, a brief moment, Dr. Moniz. I was thinking about you sitting in the Oval Office with President Trump explaining entropy and thermodynamics. We're not going to go there. What we can say is there is an anti-science view among many in America. When I look at the Democratic victories in Congress, there's some Republican victories as well, but when I look at that Democratic Party tendency, does that get us closer to some form of new debate on climate change?
Well, I hope so. Again, I don't think it'll translate into action yet, but it will set the stage going forward. Frankly, by the way, there also have been some additional, with the Democratic congressmen, additional technically trained people going to Congress, which will, I think, also help. But it's very unfortunate that the scientific aspects behind global warming and climate change have become kind of political footballs for no good reason, frankly, and I think because the basic science of global warming is really incontrovertible in terms of human activity, and so we need to be prudent. Otherwise, we're going to spend a lot of money adapting to the changes we are already seeing.
Francine, I want to explain technically trained, as we hear from Ernest Moniz. Technically trained in Washington means they barely got through trigonometry junior year in high school. Just so you understand. Right. Sine, cosine,
thank you, Tom. I think we did get it.
We have some members with advanced degrees.
Okay, some.
Mr. Moniz, what are you doing in Europe? Are you advising the European Parliament, and are you concerned that all of this, I guess, political uncertainty, given what's happening in Italy and Germany, means that actually energy policy and especially climate change will take a back step?
Well, I'm here in Dublin right now. This trip will be in Dublin and then London. Here in Dublin, I've been focusing on clean energy and climate change. The Irish government has made very, very strong commitments and statements, but they will acknowledge that they're lagging behind. So I've come here to discuss these issues and to offer some suggestions in terms of how I think the clean energy agenda has to evolve. It does include a very important focus on innovation, and I mean technology innovation, but also policy innovation and business model innovation. In fact, if I flip back to the United States, I will note that when President Trump made the announcement a year ago in June to start the withdrawal process from the Paris Agreement, within days, governors and mayors, and very importantly, large numbers of business leaders said, well, that's fine, but we're going to continue on the course of low carbon. So the business community recognizes that we're not going back from a low-carbon future. Frankly, they would like to see more stability so that they can do long-term planning, long-term capital allocation. So I think business actually is going to be an important part of the solution going forward. And that'll be true here in Europe as well.
All right, Ernest Moniz, thank you, the former U.S. Secretary of Energy and the current Nuclear Threat Initiative Chief Executive.